What's up? Travel Chronicles, chapter, I believe it's 111, subset B. I'm going to start early on this one on the way out of here. I did get my first warning from YouTube, so thank you for that. That was awesome. And I'm not going to go into great detail about what happened because obviously I don't want to get flagged again for it, but circumstances were a little odd to me because I had the video on private, or with a broken link, so that I have to send the link for somebody to see it. It wasn't public, but it was about COVID, so I violated their COVID terms apparently because I said something either about the vaccine or about treatments for COVID. And I don't think I specifically said anything that violated the terms, but it's March of 2022, so we're nearing the end of this thing. I think I could probably dispute it. When I recorded the video, it was December of 2021. So what I was talking to was I just come out of quarantine, and I was looking at the data actually from August, September time frame of what had happened there versus the vaccine efficiency or efficacy, I guess, and kind of debating how effective it actually was. But it's a dissenting point. I am not a medical professional, all right. I'm an engineer though, and I do look at a lot of data, so I'm used to looking at data and drawing conclusions from data, but their whole point is it's the consensus of the medical community, and they're still basing stuff on theory. So not going to get into that. I will wait, probably, like I said, appeal it once all the COVID stuff's out of the way. COVID is not over yet, but they recently changed the rules for the SOCU, State of the Union Address for 2022, so that the people in Congress didn't have to wear their mask and the president didn't have to wear a mask. So, big changes are coming. I think the stance on where COVID is going to change, and that may change their terms. We'll see. I'll wait till the terms change before I challenge the appeal, because what I was saying was what I was feeling in that moment. It's a historical record. It's not I'm trying to debate people or make people feel bad. It's what I was feeling in the moment in 2021. That's why I made it. Okay, so that out of the way. The second part of this chapter 111, which I may have to re-record that, or at least cut some stuff out of that, because I may have said some stuff that was controversial. So the second part of this video is Ukraine. I wanted to get into that stuff. The history a little bit, and then what I think are the likely results, because I think there's probably about 4 possibilities that could legitimately happen based on what we're seeing right now in early March of 2022, about a weekend to this invasion or military action or whatever it's being called. So I don't want to violate any terms of service about Ukraine misinformation, don't get me wrong. Okay, so my understanding, I'm not a historian or a geographical person, however that works. Sorry about the sun. Sun's out finally, right? So my understanding of the area, of course, Soviet Union broke up early 90s. All these little states or pieces of the Soviet Union became their own country, their own sovereign areas. And you had Ukraine, Georgia, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, I believe was part of that as well, Belarus, on this western side of the Soviet Union, or to the west of what's Russia now, all broke apart and became their own countries. And in doing so, some of the countries went right for, Europe, right for NATO acceptance, and I don't think they were accepted like right away, but like after 2000, somewhere in that time period, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania are NATO members now, right? Ukraine is not a NATO member, and part of that is because they were very pro-Russian at that initial split, and it kind of stayed that way up until like the 2010s, 2014, somewhere in that area, right? So they were pro-Russian. They had made some pro-Russian deals, you know, to help Russia out, where they could use their ports. Hey, you can run a gas line through our area. It's cool. And them and Belarus were kind of, you know, very pro-Russian countries on the east side. So it was like a little buffer for Russia between them and Europe, right? Even though these northern countries, Lithuania, Latvia is right above it, and Estonia is right on the border with the Soviet Union, are now NATO members. So there's still a little bit of a border, you know, a buffer between Poland and Russia on this more southern western side. In that 2014 range, the views in Ukraine, they changed leadership. The leadership became a little more pro-European, a little less pro-Russian. Some of the deals they had made, I don't know that they went back on them completely, but like they were laying the groundwork to go back on them. Maybe we join NATO now, right? And that would put NATO right up against Russia, you know, 35 miles away from their capital on this southwestern border of Russia. And I don't think Russia liked that a whole lot. So what they did in that time period, they went ahead and annexed Crimea, which is the southern peninsula of Ukraine. And the whole world's involved in other stuff. So there's a little bit of a positive feedback loop here for Putin to go off of. You know, in 2008, he attacked Georgia, the northern part of Georgia. There was some conflict there between, you know, some local regions that were connected to Russia and the Georgia, you know, government or that state, however you want to look at it. And Russia was kind of feeding those troops, helping those troops. I don't think it was ideal from a Russian standpoint, the timing of it, you know, how it happened, but the U.S. is tied up in Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, they're not really free to intervene here. That's kind of away from all the NATO countries. You know, NATO's like, you know, whatever. And they get away with, you know, just taking part of Georgia and, you know, having that little fight with them. That Russian-backed fight, maybe wasn't directly Russia, but it ends up becoming Russia. Fast forward to 2014, similar thing. There's some fighting on the east side of Ukraine with some people that are, you know, pro-Russia, some areas that are pro-Russia. Russia seizes the opportunity. Crimea has a lot of Russian people in it, and that's because of, I think, of Stalin. Like, that area, if you want to think of it, the native Ukrainians that were there, and they had Tartars, maybe, is that area? I'm not 100% sure. But the native people of that area were removed by Stalin. Okay, they were taken out. He put other people in there, and now those natives of Crimea are more sympathetic, I think, to the Russian people than maybe the European side of Ukraine, right? Mostly Russian speakers, you know, that type of thing. But it's down on the bottom of Ukraine. It's in the Black Sea. It's just a peninsula connected, very small part. Like if this was the Crimean Peninsula, it's connected to Ukraine by this, right? It's a big piece that sticks out in the water. But that's all it's connected to. It's not connected to Russia at all. So there's a big gap there. And what Ukraine did when Russia took that over, because they voted that they wanted to be Russian. so it's like, hey, we want to be Russian. It's like, that's not cool. But nobody stepped in because, you know, like we're in U.S. is in Afghanistan. You know, that's on the southern part of Ukraine. It's not next to the NATO countries. You know, it's kind of like, we don't really want to get involved with it. Plus, it seems like it was democratically approved. So, you know, I don't know the exact details of it, but pretty much nobody in the world was like, oh, you can't do that. That's wrong. Stop what you're doing. So they got away with it. But Ukraine, in that process, is like, you know, this piece of land that you annexed is still connected to us. We supply all your water, and going to turn it off. We're going to turn it off. And, like, good for them. It's like, hey, we're taking this part of land from you. Nobody asked you to do it, right? Nobody said, hey, you know what, that should be Russian. Nobody was like that. So, for them to do that and kind of screw them over a little bit, good for them. That same time, the skirmishes that were happening in Georgia, a similar thing was happening on the eastern side of Ukraine, in the Donbass region. There's like two separate little areas, two like little states, I guess, if you want to think of it like that, that were fighting, that didn't want to be Ukrainian. It was like, hey, we're pro-Russia. So with that ideological change in the middle of Ukraine, like now they were fighting against the government. So Ukraine was kind of helpless to fight back against them taking Crimea, and now you have this ongoing war or battles on the eastern side of Ukraine. And I guess they didn't have like a real good military. Everything was used up, Soviet stuff. But now with that mentality of, hey, we like Europe, maybe someday we'll be NATO. Obviously, NATO's not going to go in there and go, yeah, join NATO real quick, because of the conflict in Crimea and on the eastern side. Because any attack on a NATO country is essentially an attack on all NATO countries. So then we have to come and defend. And all those NATO countries don't want to get involved in fighting Russia in Ukraine in some type of border war, because then it would just go nuclear and end. It would not be good for everybody. So now you have to have these conventional fights, but it has to be Ukraine fighting Russia in a conventional manner, which is what we have today. So why did Russia go into Ukraine? Kind of because of that positive feedback loop, right? And the weakness that was displayed on the global scale by the U.S. We yanked all of our troops out of Afghanistan, kind of left in Iraq. It was, from a military standpoint, it was a complete disaster. I think that's fair. The way we just yanked everybody out. There's no plan for who's going to take over. Taliban just kind of came in and swept over everything as soon as we left. So not a success for us being there for 20 years. Basically, is what that amounts to. So you have that display. You have the recent history of Russia being able to attack Georgia, a neighbor. They attacked Ukraine. They took part of Ukraine like 8 years ago. So, now them going in, it's like, okay, nobody's going to say anything. But, we're not tied up in Iraq and Afghanistan now. Our military's free. Everybody's watching social media. Everybody can see exactly what you're doing in real time and bypass the news channels and the media feeds. So you don't get to control your narrative now. Everybody's looking at this. Everybody's responding in real time with how they feel, right then. And as soon as everybody sees Russia attack Ukraine, because this tension has been building up for a while, they're like, dude, that's not cool. It's like, you shouldn't be doing that. Like, and everybody's got their opinion out there on these social media platforms. It's like, that's wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. And it doesn't make any sense. And they're like, why are you just hitting them? Obviously, there's some reasons. Ukraine trying to become a NATO ally that close to Russia unnerves them, right? They're saying that Ukraine is now Nazi controlled or something like that. It's kind of BS, right? But in 2014, it would have been like, okay, whatever, we don't want to get involved. Now, the way they're attacking, they're coming into the capital, right? They're attacking hard on the east side. They're coming up through Crimea. They're really hitting Ukraine hard to kind of send a message. So to me, there's three possible outcomes. One, they're trying to take over all of Ukraine, which is what Macron, the president of France, has said. They want the whole thing. They want to be all the way to the border. And then they have the border buffer area that is now Russia, but used to be Ukraine. Maybe they don't care about that eastern border that much. Western border, far west border, that would be against Europe. So they want to take over the whole thing. They want them to completely surrender. Well, the rest of the world is just like, nah, we're cutting off off banks, we're cutting you off no-fly zones, we're cutting you off of everything we can cut you off of. Any assets you got out there you're not able to access. And Russia's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, you just let us do this 8 years ago. What's the problem? And now everybody's kind of like, yeah, this isn't cool. Because I think there's a lot of people beyond politics that are kind of controlling the narrative, so to speak. So with that pushback, with that fight, and that fight from the general public, everybody protesting, saying, you know, how wrong this is, political leaders have to kowtow to the general people. They have to. So they put these restrictions on. Russia's still in this fight. They're still carrying out their military action, which my belief at the beginning of this is that area of Crimea that they had annexed, now they need to get to the mainland. They need to free up that canal that Ukraine had blocked off and shut off the water to. They need to free that. So they're going to go all the way to the river on that south part. And, you know, maybe in order to get that concession, you know, they come in from the east. I don't think they go all the way to the river from the east side. The way Ukraine's divided up, or the way it was divided, it was more of like historical boundaries. And maybe Russia wanted to have that bigger buffer in there to start with that was pro-Russia, but not Russia. And now that it's not pro-Russia anymore, it's like we don't want you to have all of this. And it would have probably made more sense when they were dividing it up to start with, that they go all the way to that river, and that river back is Russia, and it's mostly Russian speakers anyway in that area. And then Ukraine is the part west of the river, but that's not how it was divided up to start with. And I don't know that they want all of that area, especially in the northern part. I would say they probably want to come in from the east, that part that's, you know, been fighting with Ukraine for the last 8 years. They take that, they take this southern part of Crimea up to the river, so they have access to water for the area that they annexed, and maybe a little bit more to the southeast, some of that gap. That becomes Russia. That's one option, right? The second option is that with all this fighting, with everything that's going on, the hit that Russia's taken on the international scene, banking, finance, everything that's just collapsing there, they're like, okay, you know, obviously we don't want all of this. They end up conceding Crimea back to Ukraine. They concede to stay out of that eastern region, let it get unified again with Ukraine, and they completely withdraw because of everything that's going on. That's more of a long-term outcome, but I think they're going to get in there. They're going to choke off they say they're struggling. I don't know how much they're struggling. I mean, a week in and you're almost to the capital. You're taking over a couple other cities. I mean, it's not that horrible of an offensive when you look at it from that standpoint. I don't know how history is going to judge this right now, but to me, their preferred outcome is to get that area above Crimea, part of the land on the east side, and then call it a day. And maybe they have to go beyond that to start with. They have to come down to the capital. They got to take some port cities further west, and then they can be like, all right, we'll concede. You guys can have all that stuff back. You can have your second largest city back. We just want this area, this small area down here, and this land over here. It makes more sense for us to have it. I think that's how the negotiation goes. Either that, or they try to take the whole thing, and then you have probably World War III break out over Ukraine. I don't think that's the end goal, though. I think it's just some leftover. And that's the third option. World War III is the third option. Or Russia takes over all of Ukraine somehow. I guess that's 4. So we'll see how this military option plays out. I just want to get my thoughts down. Early March 2022, what I think's happening. You know, I feel horrible for the Ukrainian people. I mean, you're just sitting there and you get attacked. It'd be like if Canada came down here and started attacking us. It's like, what's going on? What are you doing? You know? I mean, that's kind of how everybody's looking at it. I mean, people are dying in this. They're bombing people's, you know, where they live, their apartments and stuff. It's ridiculous. So, you know, comes to a quick conclusion. I hope Russia loses their entire foothold in that area, to be honest with you, and concedes. But we're really wounding them right now, and my biggest fear is that they lash out because of the international outrage, which is unprecedented, because like I said, he's done this twice. So I don't think this was the expectation from anybody when they were laying out these plans of what they thought could happen. Or maybe it's like a worst case scenario of what they thought could happen, and worst case scenarios lead to other worst case scenarios. And when you feel like you're trapped and in a corner, how hard is it to push that button? Probably not that hard. So I hope it doesn't come to that, not by any means, some type of retaliation. But I don't think it was really well thought out from the start. Russia's got a declining population. They have a negative birth rate. This is an area that predominantly Russian speakers are in. It's a way to boost your population back up. You take over some land that gives you access to more oil and gas. To Russia, there's a lot of positives for them trying to come in there and take this over. But the negatives that they're going to have to go through to get it are become massive, where they did not have this restriction before. They have not been met with this head pressure before. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully the sanctions are enough to get them to pull out of there and get them to stop. But we'll see. Thoughts and prayers to the people in Ukraine right now. Definitely thinking about you, thinking about the stuff that's going on. I don't think it's right. And I hope things work out for them. All right, we'll follow up here later and see exactly what did happen.